As it's time now for our financial focus with our two money men, business and market analyst Seth Denson and accounting professor, Montclair State University, Dan Geltrude. Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome.
Good morning, Alison.
All right, so let's talk about what's happening in the world of business. Let's start with the eviction moratorium. Dan, we've been talking about this for a couple of days. Democrats are upset that it's expired. Can you just explain a little bit about what is it and how does it affect day-to-day Americans?
Sure. So basically what happened was Congress said those that are renting, if they're impacted by COVID, do not have to pay their rent, and landlords can't evict them. So that was the eviction moratorium that was put in place. Now that has expired. So what that means is now landlords can start to evict tenants for non-payment of rent. Now, who does that impact? Well, it impacts those on either side of that equation, meaning tenants and landlords. But here's the rub in all this. A tenant has the ability to say, well, I'm not paying my rent. And now what recourse does a landlord have? Now, the government has set up some emergency funding for landlords, but landlords have to go through a process to get that money. Shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't it be that the tenant has to go to the government for help? The landlord didn't do anything. They're still supplying housing, but yet they're not getting paid.
Yeah, Seth, I mean, a lot of talk is about the tenants, but the landlords, right, they've still had to pay the bank over the last few months when their tenants weren't paying. Do you agree with the way the eviction rules have been handled?
Well, no, I don't agree, and Dan's right. It is interesting, though. A lot of Americans, I think, and I don't know if this is mainstream media, think that landlords must be daddy warbucks sitting around with a whole bunch of cash sitting in their pocket, waiting to kick people out into the cold. And quite frankly, that's just not the truth. The vast majority of landlords in the United States, throughout the country, if we kind of take a broad brush, which I'm not always a fan of doing, are actually small business owners. These are people who are leveraging those mortgages, and they're offsetting that mortgage cost with the rent. And so when they're not receiving income due to the rent, they weren't necessarily receiving relief from mortgages. But listen, this is bureaucracy at its worst in the way that this whole program was set up. As Dan mentioned, there was almost $50 billion allocated by the federal government either to renters to go apply for assistance or to landlords to apply for assistance. That money was allocated through the states. But the broad brush in which the federal government used to define who gets that money and how it needs to be used, well, that was the problem, because you had at-risk households being a broad definition, meaning, as Dan kind of alluded to, you could have never lost your job, never lost your income, and still get this moratorium applied. And so people found a way to not pay rent that didn't necessarily need the advantage to do that, and that was a problem. Then it backlogged the system so that those that did need the money had a harder time getting it. And again, this just kind of goes back to the process. When Uncle Sam passes something but necessarily can't manage something, everybody pays in the long run.
Yeah, it's going through all that red tape, too, as Dan mentioned. Dan, I want to switch gears a little bit. In New York, Governor Cuomo, he's suggesting vaccine-only admission for private businesses across the state. What do you think of this?
Well, my understanding is that it is legal for employers to mandate vaccines. So now we leave that up to employers to decide whether they're going to mandate having their employees get a vaccine before they can come back to the office. I personally don't have an issue with that. That is a decision made by a private company, and if that's what they decide is best for their business, best for their employees, then so be it. I don't like when the government steps in, and Governor Cuomo is not doing this yet, to step in and say, you must do this. You give people an option from the standpoint of private companies can decide to mandate or not mandate it. Leave it up to them for what's best for their business model, and then let it fall out from there.
All right. Seth, I want to get your take, but we're running out of time. We'll have to pick this back up next week. Thank you so much, Seth Denson and Dan Geltrude.